Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Ashwin Mehta, and I'm the Medical Director for Integrative Health as well as Physician Wellness here at Memorial Health System. And we have partnered together with Human Resources Department, Organizational Development, Marketing and Communications, Physician Wellness, and our Cancer Center in order to bring together a list of resources that can be beneficial to you to promote wellness and resilience in the context of dealing with the challenges posed by this coronavirus pandemic. And I am delighted to be joined this morning by our very own Dr. Sameet Kumar. And he is, besides being a real dear friend, he is a clinical psychologist at the Memorial Cancer Institute. He has over 20 years of experience working with the Cancer Center patients, has written numerous books about grief, anxiety, and mindfulness, and has been with Memorial for 10 years, presents internationally in the areas of mindfulness, resilience, and grief. And we're just so delighted for him to be able to share his wisdom and balanced perspective, which I have benefited from tremendously over so many years. So Dr. Kumar, just to get into the real crux of some of the questions that people have been putting together as part of participation in this interactive wellness panel. How do we deal? This is a question submitted by our very own Teddy Spiropoulos, who's the director of our Integrative Medicine program, and she wants to know, how do we deal with the pressures of being in such close proximity to people with whom we live for extended periods of time?
Yeah, these are strange times we're living through. I think it's really caught a lot of people unawares where suddenly society just kind of stopped. And what I was describing it to somebody else is that if you can think of our lives as a motion picture, suddenly we're in a still shot, a freeze frame. And everything that was in that random frame through the progression of our lives is now stuck in this one spot. Now, hopefully you're with people that you don't mind being stuck with, quarantined with. But for a lot of us, it can be challenging. It's not very easy. And I think very few of us had the advance notice of many months or years that, we need to kind of be in perfect situations. None of us are in perfect situations. And I think those who started out perfect, we were probably good to go for a couple of weeks. But, this is uncertain. Human beings, my work with cancer and grief has taught me that human beings are not really wired for uncertainty. We tend to encode uncertainty as stress and as potentially a threat to our survival. So in a confined space for a long period of time with people, it can get very challenging. A lot of us will experience stress, mood swings, irritability. These are actually the same kinds of processes that we see people experience with grief. And really a lot of what is driving this challenge that we have of being with people that we may not want to be with 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is a lot of us are really just grieving the lives that we thought we were going to be living. We all had plans for the month of March, which seemed to last for years. We've had plans for April, for May. I know I had concert tickets I was hoping to use, and they're kind of on hold now indefinitely. There were other events, birthdays, all these things are just kind of being galloped over and time is eating them up. So as we're going through this uncertainty with people that we care about or that we thought we cared about, people that we thought cared about us, it's really not that unusual to start having mood swings, irritability, poor sleep, and we're going to talk about all of these issues. Really what we find is that if we can carve out either physical space or if the physical space is lacking in where we're living, then we're really confined to carving out space in terms of time. So if we can't manage to have a little corner of our homes that's just for us that we can kind of retreat to and it's our downtime space, whether it's a meditation area or an area for prayer or reflection, I really do encourage that downtime not include these devices, which, they're great. I use mine too often, but they don't really help us process our stress in the most beneficial ways. Now, you may thoroughly enjoy playing a game on your phone, but I'm sure you've noticed that you've accidentally spent way too much time on your phone than you thought it was, because the screens and the technology, they really do interfere with our ability to tell time. So what a lot of us are really striving for is moments of peace and clarity and a sense of spaciousness when we're confined. And that spaciousness is hard to really do when we're reliant on screens all the time, or we're with people that we don't want to be with all the time. What I would really strongly encourage is that instead of using technology, to use some of the other wisdom techniques that we have, a lot of the other technologies that are really timeless and ancient, things like breath awareness, diaphragmatic breathing, counting of the breath. These are all things that we've talked about for years and years with our patients, and there are things that you may be familiar with in some way. There's I just said don't use technology, but there are a lot of apps that help also, where you won't be staring at the phone, but you can kind of use these as timers for guiding your breath, things like Calm and Headspace, Insight Timer. These are all meditation apps that can help us deepen our sense of freedom within a confined physical or temporal space, meaning that if you don't have like hours and hours to burn, some of us do, but if you don't have hours and hours, you can really get a lot of profound relaxation, recharging the stress response in just about 5 or 10 minutes of awareness of the breath. And that does involve maybe being more aware of how your breathing is. What we're really trying to promote is that as we're enduring this quarantine, no matter how long it's going to be, it's really open-ended, and it may happen again for all we know. We don't know. Really trying to promote awareness of the stress response as it's happening. These mood swings are normal. Moments of irritability are normal. Suddenly looking at your spouse or your child or your friend and just kind of being annoyed at the little things they're doing, totally normal. It doesn't mean they're bad people. These are very unusual circumstances we're living in. So I don't think I would make any big decisions about relationships in the context of a quarantine. I think really the big decisions that need to be made is how we manage the stress of the quarantine. So what we really try to promote is diaphragmatic breathing, breathing through the belly as much as possible. And just a very simple way to do this is think about, imagine there's a balloon in your belly, and to inhale, you're going to inflate that balloon. And to exhale, you're going to slowly just squeeze all the air out of your belly. And what this does is it allows our diaphragm, which is at the bottom of our lungs, and it is kind of straddling between our chest and our abdomen. It allows our diaphragm to guide our lungs. Again, imagine there's a balloon, inflate that balloon in your belly with air, and then to exhale, just squeeze that balloon, let all that air out. What that does is that when we're facing stress, we start to take these short, rapid, shallow breaths. This pressure that a lot of us feel in our chest with stressful moments, the breath awareness really tends to short circuit that stress response. So we kind of have this feeling of starting all over again. And within just a few breaths, maybe just 3 to 5 minutes of doing belly breathing, you can reset that stress response. And, you know, if you can't leave your living arrangement, you can't kind of kick the person out, you don't have a whole lot of physical space to have your private time in, or you don't have a lot of time that you can get away, you can reset your stress response with a breath. One of my favorite meditation teachers is Sharon Salzberg. If you have time on your hands, you can download her podcast and listen to them also. She has some wonderful phrases that, you know, the challenges of human existence are persistent. They're always going to be there. But with our breath and with awareness of our breath, we can always learn to begin again. And we can do that 100 times a day if we need to. We can do it 5 times a day if we need to do it. We can do it 1,000 times. But no matter what happens, we can always begin again. And for me, it's always been about beginning again with the breath.
Wow. Profound and poetic, as usual, Sameet. Thank you for those pearls. So, you know, just to kind of recap, number one, find a space, carve out a space for yourself and a time for yourself to be alone. You said something, you put it so well. You said, allow yourself the opportunity to mourn the life that we thought we would be living these days and around these times. That really brought it home for me. And then, you know, utilizing, you know, all the resources and technologies we have, you know, to access mindfulness resources and meditations, and using our breath to really reset and begin again with a sense of, you know, renewal, revitalization. I think that those are all really tremendous techniques. You know, interestingly enough, I just learned that anybody with a national provider identification number can actually sign up for one of these apps. I think it's Headspace, and
Yes.
we can make that available to our Memorial community in due course as part of the list of resources we're pooling together. Another question for you. This is submitted by coincidentally another member of our integrative team, Ms. Denise Nappy, who's our clinical manager. She's asking, how do we cope with difficulties that hospital employees encounter when going home? So after working in the hospital and coming back home, how do we cope with our family's reactions, fears, anxieties? How do we better deal with that?
Yeah. Yeah. This is probably one of the most important questions, and one that I don't think is going to be answered necessarily once, but this is something that we're going to be revisiting for months, possibly years. I don't think that what I heard this week is that we're at the end of the beginning of this thing. And right now it's April 2020, and we're at the end of the beginning of this thing. So we don't know exactly how long this goes on for, but we know that this is one of the most challenging times in healthcare, in the history of healthcare. And I think the 1918 pandemic was probably close, but none of us were alive for that. The polio epidemics in the 50s was probably close, but none of us were really practicing then, I don't believe. There's been other outbreaks, but nothing quite like this. And it's huge. And I think we need to recognize that this is much bigger than any one of us. And any one of us cannot get through this alone as a healthcare provider. It's impossible. It's much bigger than we are. There's an immensity to it. With the immensity comes almost a sense of futility. And it can be very strange to go from a very challenging environment like a COVID ICU unit, or even just a hospital where the atmosphere is completely different than what it was in February or January. And we're watching our colleagues go through hell, and we're sometimes going through it ourselves. And suddenly you're home and you're supposed to be mom, dad, brother, sister, husband, wife. It's very, very strange. I think it's really important to observe transitions, to honor the immensity of what we're facing as a team, and to honor the immensity of what we're facing as individuals. I don't think that anybody gets through this by denying the tragic scope of what we're living through and how horrible this is. So I think part of the challenges of transitioning home are going to be, before you walk into the door, breathe. It's the same answer as before. Address that stress response, which is coming from a good spot. It's coming from a place of self-preservation and a desire and a wish to be well. But out of control, it's going to not be serving our best interests. So transition in, before you get out of the car, before you walk through the door, just check in with your breath. What I've been trying to recommend the nurses in the COVID unit do is what's called box breathing. It's very simple, and it can be done through the mask. 4-4-4 breathing. Inhale for a count of 4, hold it for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4. And just doing that for 5 minutes, it can really change the circuitry and the wiring of the brain in terms of how it's experiencing stress. I think that journaling is a very, very powerful tool. And you can do this once you're home. There's a sort of momentum that acute stress carries, where along with that momentum is a sense of futility of doing anything healthy or helpful. Because again, we're dealing with an immense global event that we're all taking part in. And little old me writing in a notebook or punching out some words on a computer, it doesn't seem like it would be enough. And you're right, it's not enough. But all we have is a drop in the bucket to add every day, just a drop. And gradually those little drops in the bucket do add up. And I think the main challenge that we have to kind of fight against as we deal with this pandemic is a sense of nihilism, that what we do doesn't matter, that it's not that big a deal, that we can do whatever we want. We can have that extra drink, we can have that extra toke, we can start smoking again or anything like that. These decisions matter. These choices really do matter a lot. And our families, when we go home, they're probably not going to understand what we've been through. They're probably not going to understand the real awfulness of it. I mean, maybe they get a sense of it, but chances are they're not going to know. And I don't think it's our job to educate them on how horrible this thing is. They didn't sign up for this. None of us did. And I think probably the hard truth for us to understand is that the stress response is something for us to master, because ultimately it's the same equation. If we can try, and I don't think we can do it successfully, at least not right now, maybe in the future, if we can try to manage our stress response before we go home, what it helps us feel is a sense of responsibility for not just our stress, but also our happiness. It may not be attainable to the level that we want it to be, but the best we can do is try. And so I think doing these transitional rituals like breathing in the car, doing the box breathing before we get into the house, writing in the journal, just kind of divulging, if it's helpful for you, just writing down some of the more awful things that you've been through, some of the more challenging emotions that you're having. A lot of research shows that just writing that stuff down has a therapeutic effect. And again, we're talking about little drops in the bucket every day. We're not going to process all of this in one day. There's not going to be one day where somebody hits a switch and everything's all better. It's these daily choices that are going to help us in the long run.
I love it. I love it. Wonderful advice. You know, I particularly appreciate the sort of symbolic gesture of closing up your journal and really, you know, just kind of, you know, ready for a new page, a new chapter, if you will. And you know, you said we must find time to honor the immensity of what we're facing. That really resonated with me a lot. So thank you for that. And you know, sure. all of these techniques that you're sharing with us, you know, it's so important to become aware of that residual energy that we kind of drag in with us back into our home environments. And you know, our loved ones, our family members, our loved ones are really queuing off of that energy. And so just to become aware of that by using these techniques, I think is gonna really be helpful for people. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Sure, sure.
So moving on to our next question. This is a question that was submitted by me. And you know, because not only are we not necessarily wired to address the nihilism and the anxieties and fears that chronically kind of affect us during this time, but we're also really not wired to be in isolation. So how do you address coping with the loneliness? You know, not that I'm lonely or anything, but how do you address the loneliness and isolation that a lot of people might feel these days?
So some people are doing really well with the isolation, but a lot of us are really struggling with it. We miss our friends. We miss our family members. We miss people. We miss being able to go to the store without it being a big deal. I think what a lot of us are really missing is physical contact, the senses, engaging the senses with other people, being able to hug, being able to just shake hands. You know, all these things were just normal just a very short time ago. Let's face it, there's nothing that can take the place of being able to be in the physical space with other people less than 6 to 10 feet apart and just being able to take it for granted. The best we can do is really the best we can do. I think it's really important, try to contact somebody daily, on a daily basis, who's not in your home, just to kind of have that window, that emotional window into normal life or some semblance of normal life. If you're able to have a pet, I think pets have been really the winners of this, and maybe some cats may disagree with me, but if you're able to have a pet, it can be very helpful to have that sense of physical intimacy and being able to pet a dog, or to, you know, even some of the smaller little furry animals. That human contact, that sense of touch, is so important for our health and well-being for most of us, that if we're missing it from humans, we may be able to get it from our companion animals. But the next best thing is, you know, as much as I hate these devices, they really are our windows to the outside world. Have to make sure that those windows are being opened regularly, and reach out to people that maybe you haven't talked to in a long time. I have very mixed feelings about social media. It's kind of not really intimate contact. It's contact, but it's sort of contact in the way that going to a wedding or a really big party is. You're able to see a lot of people, but you're not really able to have a meaningful communication with the people that you may want to talk to. So seek those people out that you really want to talk to. If you haven't talked to them in years, guess what? The whole world is going through this. It's not unusual anymore to reach out and talk to people you haven't called in years. If you can, it's strongly recommended that you use a video app like FaceTime, or to do something like a WhatsApp video chat. Have that face-to-face contact. There's so much that we derive from being able to make eye contact with people and being able to see other people in front of us, that I think it's really important to have that video face-to-face contact as much as possible. And it's not the same, but it's the best we can do. And that's all we got.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Sameet, thank you so much. You know, I grew up in such an affectionate family, and not only have I not seen them in over a month, but I haven't had a chance to give them a hug. And we're a very kind of huggy family. So that has been tough. But I must say, I also have enjoyed, catching up with old friends whom I hadn't spoken to or reconnected with in quite some time. So, you know, that is quite a recognizable positive that's been coming, in the midst of all this. So thank you so much for your insights and your wisdom, as always. Dr. Sameet Kumar, really appreciate all that you do to so compassionately care for the Memorial community at large, not just the patients whom you care for day to day, but also our employees and our healthcare community as a whole. So again, thank you for your insights and compassionate wisdom, and look forward to additional dialogues in this way. People, please keep a lookout for all of the wellness resources that our Wellness and Resilience Committee is making available to you. Thank you all very much for tuning in and participating. We're going to be welcoming your questions. Our Director of Operations, Ms. Teddy Sparopoulos, is going to be accepting questions that you would like. So we do want this to be very engaging and interactive. So please do offer your participation by sending in those questions that you'd like us to address in this virtual wellness panel in future. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and looking forward to next time with you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.